Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my November wrap up. So it's rather small. I don't anticipate this will take us very long because I didn't read loads, it seems. I don't really know what happened. I don't know where the reading mojo went, but it sort of just fizzled out. I've been in a real puzzling mood. So I have been listening to a couple of audiobooks, but like, I don't know where the reading mojo is. Like, my physical reading has not been very good this month. The audiobooks that I have listened to, I haven't been even that good at that. I've been watching lots of puzzle YouTube, which I've found is like a thing, and so I've been in that rabbit hole and just watching that. So I did manage to finish 4 books in the month of November, coming to a total of 1,907 pages. I have been reading a 5th, and so I would have been over the 2,000 page mark, which is still like a good amount of pages. Like, that's still a lot of pages and a lot more than the average. It's just less than I typically read. 2 of the books were fantasy, 2 were sci-fi, 2 were adult, 2 were YA. And then in terms of the star ratings, I had some sort of higher ones and then some lower ones. So I had also more mediocre. So 1 4.5 star, 1 4.25 star, and then 2 sort of 3.5 star. I continued in 2 series and I started 1 series, and I have gone through and like catalogued everything on my little tracker now, and I can say that I have 25 series that are on the go. So I feel pretty happy with that number. It's in the mid-20s, and quite a few of those I'm waiting for the next books in the series to come out. It's in a relatively good place. In terms of personal stuff this month, I've done 1 vlog, which you will have seen, where I went to Yalk and then injured myself. I feel like that's like, I guess, a highlight of the month. No, not really a highlight, like a focal point, a thing that I think about when I think about November. I also went to skate at Somerset House with work, so I did that. I'm not very good at ice skating, but I didn't fall over, and then I ate lots of fondue. There's so much else to say about November? I don't think so. I don't think there was anything overly memorable about my November, really. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. There was some nice food throughout the month, bits and pieces going on. Anyway, let's get on to the books. Let's do the mediocre ones first, and then we'll move onwards and upwards to better things. So I continued in the Skyward series, and I understand why people sort of say that this goes a little bit downhill with Cytonic, because I love Skyward. I love Skyward. I really enjoy Starsight. Like, those ones were really good. Like, Skyward sort of, they're both like 4.5 stars, whereas I struggled, I think, a bit with Cytonic. So in this month, I read Redawn, which is the second book in the Skyward Flight novellas. So you read this before Cytonic, and I enjoyed Redawn. I think I had a bit of an awkward reading experience with it because I read the first 100 or so pages, and then I was going back to visit my parents for the weekend, and I was like, well, I don't want to take the rest of Redawn with me because that's only 100 pages, and I'd finished that, and then I would have had to have taken a second book with me. So I was like, I don't really want to be taking 2 books back because I'm only going with a backpack for the weekend. So then I was like, let's just pick a new book and I'll finish the 100 pages later. So then I picked up another book, which I'll talk about, and then I came back and I finished the last 100 pages. But I think because of that disruptive experience, which is not the book's fault, I disrupted my flow because the first 100 pages I was really enjoying, and then I struggled a little bit getting back into that flow in the second half. But I enjoyed it as a novella. I'd say it was like a 3.5 star, like 3.75. I enjoyed what was covered in this novella. I enjoyed the characters that we explored. I enjoyed seeing what they were going through. Like, I enjoyed the novella. Then there's Cytonic, which was a bit more of a struggle. So in this we have another new location, which I wasn't super attached to. I would say this book felt quite young. It felt quite young, maybe immature in some places. That I get that this is for a YA audience, but this felt younger, in my opinion, than Skyward and Starsight. It felt like our main character was reading younger, that she was not aging, she was unaging, she was getting younger in this compared to how she acted in the first 2 books. And so I feel as though I connected to it less because of how young this one felt, but it felt a bit like an adventure, a lark with lower stakes. And I don't know, I didn't quite connect to it. That although I still like Spencer, our main character, she annoyed me a little in this, I would say. And I do think the twists and turns and the ending was done well, like the Sandal Arch, I enjoyed that. I just had issues getting through the middle of it. I did in the end listen to this, then I started reading it physically, and then I was so into my jigsaw, I was like, you need to pick up the pace with reading, but also I also just wanted to do my jigsaw. I finished it now, I can show you a picture of it. It was very pleasing to do. Yeah, picked up the pace by listening to this one. I would say that I feel as though with Cytonic and these novellas, it's just a little bit all over the place. I think it would have worked better if we had somehow combined the novellas and Cytonic into one story and made it a bit more cohesive, because when I was in these novellas I wanted to know what was going on over here, and when I was over here I wanted to know what was going on in the novellas. So I feel as it would be better if these were just combined and just mixed together, and I think the story would have been a lot more cohesive. But I do still have the final novella to read, so I can update on that in December once I've read that. The book that I read whilst I paused read on was The Final Strife by Zara El Arifi, and I'd say this is probably my favourite book of the month. I really enjoyed this one. I've given it like 4.5 stars. I'm going to see how it lives in my brain, whether I up it or if I up it or not, but I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed this one. I had hyped it up a bit in my head before going into it because I was like, I feel as though I'm going to really enjoy this, and it definitely stuck the landing for me. I really liked Zara's writing style. I enjoyed her character work. I enjoyed the pacing and the plot and the intricacies of the world and the politics at play. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really thoroughly enjoyed this one. I'm looking forward to continuing on in the series. So this is a multi-perspective fantasy story set in a world where the class system is divided by your blood type. So you have the red bloods who are at the top and they're able to work magic and they are in a position of power. You have the blue bloods who are the sort of working class, who are sort of downtrodden, very much looked down upon. And then you have the clear bloods who are even more looked down upon. They try to rise up many years ago, and now all of them are repressed for that uprising that failed. Their hands are cut off and their tongues are cut out when they are born, so that they will never rise up ever again, because they will not have the capability to do it. And so these are the hierarchy, and we are following some various perspectives. I don't know, 20 odd years ago, some babies were swapped at birth, red and blue bloods, and so we're following them. And as we enter these sets of trials, so I do love a trial. I've said it before, I really do enjoy a trial, and that sort of like high level of not anxiety, but that high level of tension that a trial gives. And overall, I think it was the characters that I really enjoyed. I don't think they're necessarily all the most likable, but I think they're very human and very dynamic and very sort of raw, I would say. So I did find them all very interesting to read from their perspectives, and it was the politics as well. I think the politics in it is done really well and really interesting, and talking about this book now makes me really excited to continue on with it, with the series. So I would really recommend The Final Strife. I loved this one. Favourite of the month. And then the other book that I guess relatively enjoyed, and more than I expected, was Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarrow. So this is the sequel to Fourth Wing. I did, in the end, pick this up pretty much on release day, and I read it. It is quite long. It is a long one. So this is a fantasy romance, although I'd say this one definitely leans more on the fantasy series, following our main character Violet, who enters into the Rider's Quadrant in book 1, where she trains to be a dragon rider, and it is very brutal. And this is the continuation. I actually really enjoyed this. I think as a fantasy reader, I really enjoyed this. It lent more into the fantasy elements than the romantic elements, which I think worked for me. I was really anxious going into this, thinking that it's quite long, doesn't need to be this long. And there definitely were probably parts that could have been trimmed down a little bit, but I overall enjoyed the progression of the plot and the way that this unfolded. I was nervous about the way that the romance would play out in this series, because when your characters get together, how do you manage to maintain that angst in later installments in that series? And actually I think the angst was done well in here. I did find the romance still angsty, and I was still compelled to keep reading it. It wasn't just a happy romance. I liked our dragons in this. I continued to enjoy our main characters. I liked the politics at play here and the sort of different parts of the book. I mean, the book is broken up into parts. I guess I did notice like that shift when we went from like part 1 to part 2, and like that shift in sort of where the plot was progressing. I like the introduction of the new characters that we got. I do think the character work could be stronger. That obviously we've got our main character and the love interest who have quite strong personalities, but I do think the supporting cast is relatively weak, that they are all a little bit interchangeable. I don't feel as though their personalities have quite been fully explored. They're a little bit forgettable, I would say, in the supporting cast. So I think they could be better. They could be better. I like some of the like darkness that gets explored in here. There's some very sort of grim, gruesome scenes in here, and I think they were done well. I enjoyed them. So I really enjoyed this. I feel as though I've seen some like quite negative things about this book, especially from people that adored Fourth Wing, but actually this lived up for me. This lived up. I continue to enjoy this book. To my surprise, I'm pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this. And then the book that I am midway through, I am proud to say that I am doing well. I'm finishing the Bone Shard War Drowning Empire series. I'm doing it. So it is currently like the 3rd of December as of filming this, and I am very close to finishing. Very, very close. Should finish later on today. But in November, I've read maybe like half of the book. Pretty good progress. Pretty good progress here. I feel quite proud of myself that I'm actually going to be able to say that I will have finished later on today this series. Can't say it just yet, considering I have like, oh, I don't know, 60 pages left. So not a lot at all. Will be finished. I guess my thoughts as of now is that I did manage to get back into this series, which I was a bit nervous about. I did watch a couple of like, not recaps because I couldn't find any sort of recaps of the second book, but I watched a discussion of the second book and I was like, I have forgotten everything. How am I going to dive into this third book? But actually, there is a time skip to this book, and maybe the time skip worked in my favour. I think it's about 2 years have passed since book 2, and 2 years have passed for me. So 2 years in the book and 2 years for me, and maybe that actually helped me because I don't know, because those timelines aligned. So actually I did manage to get back into this. There are definitely some parts that are a bit vaguer, but I did manage to get back into it and get settled-ish. I don't think it's the strongest book. So like, I'm not obsessed with it. I haven't been in love with this book. I've enjoyed it. I've had a fun time, I would say. Yeah, that's how I describe it. I describe this book as a fun time, but I haven't been in love with it. I think it's been, yeah, pretty fine. Probably like, I expect this will be like 3.5 stars, I think, which is a little bit disappointing. It's a weird one. Like, I'm pleasantly surprised by how much I've been able to get back into this series, and that I'm like remembering things and being able to like get on with these characters, but also I'm not obsessed. So it's more, it feels like a slightly weird one to try and like rate, but I have been enjoying it, and I'm very happy to be like wrapping up this series and to have continued to have enjoyed it all the way through. I guess I can talk about my final thoughts in my December wrap up, because it will be a December book, and then I can sort of say if the ending sticks the landing or not, because as of right now, I haven't got to the end. This is going to be a success. This has been on my TBR for so long. Since like April, I've been planning to read this book, and it's now December and it's finally happened. So I feel quite proud of myself that I have finally managed to get this one off of my TBR. Right, and that is it. There's not that many of them. Not that many of them this time round. So I guess we will just leave it there. Let me know how your reading in November went, and if you have read any of these and your opinions on them, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!